Hello everyone, welcome to Grandline's online salon. I'm Rama, a communications coach from Grandline and your host for today. Introducing my partner, Ms. Florence, who is also the founder of Travel Bag Philippines, a tour company. Ms. Florence wears many hats. She is also an HR, training, and business consultant. Hi, Ms. Florence.
Hi, Ms. Roma. Yes, and every Saturday, your online salon host. Hello, everyone. I'm excited about our topic today, creating safe spaces. How do we stop sexual assault, harassment, and violence?
In this program, we feature several social issues and current events to raise awareness and help the public know more about relevant issues, trends, and topics. Let's begin.
Last year, the Safe Spaces Act was finally enacted and expanded the scope of the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995. This Bawal Bastos law penalizes cursing, wolf whistling, catcalling, leering, and intrusive grazing, taunting, cursing, unwanted invitations, misogynistic, homophobic, and sexist slurs, persistent unwanted comments on one's appearance, and relentless requests for one's personal details.
Indeed, Ms. Flaw, safe spaces only used to mean private property. When the 1995 law came out, safe spaces were expanded to the public domain, legally described to be in work, educational, and training facilities. The new Safe Spaces Act expands them even further to public spaces like streets and malls, and even in cyberspace. Also, in the old law, only persons who have authority, influence, and moral ascendancy could be charged as offenders. There are no provisions for harassment by subordinates or peers. Now, anyone can be an offender.
Data from the Philippine National Police Women and Children Protection Council show that sexual harassment is the fifth commonly reported incident related to violence against women. Meanwhile, figures from the SWS show that 8 out of 10 young women aged 18 to 24 have experienced sexual harassment at least once in their lifetime. The Philippine Commission on Women laments this as the slim number of women reporting their experience. 2 in 5 women, that is 41%, aged 15 to 49, have never sought help to end violence nor told anyone about violence. 1 in 4 told someone about violence but did not seek help.
That may be changing now because of cyberspace, Ms. Flaw. Hashtags like hashtag MCGS do better, hashtag step up UAP, hashtag times up Ateneo, hashtag maniacs of UPB, and hashtag Iha Ako are just some of those that trended online recently, igniting the courage of some victims and enabling them to speak up about the abuse they've experienced in their schools and online. With social media, victims found their voice to spread awareness against harassment. The hashtag MeToo movement globally started all this, making it easy for people to talk about harassment, sexual assault, and sexual violence. It has become a global movement that sparked significant changes, both social and legal.
In a way, that is good news, Ms. Roma. Good because people are starting to talk about it openly. I think it is very important for victims to come out and share their experiences so we are all aware that sexual crimes can happen to anyone. In fact, due to the pandemic, there has been a rise in sexual violence, oftentimes perpetrated by the victim's own family and friends. This is a serious topic that deserves to be discussed, Ms. Roma. Let's start the ball rolling by introducing our guest today.
Let's welcome our first guest speaker, Attorney Catherine Cathy Panguban. She is a staunch advocate and defender of women and children's rights since her college days. She is currently the head of the Women and Children Committee of the National Union of People's Lawyers and a member of Gabriela Women's Party Legal Services. Even before she got her Bachelor of Laws degree from Adamson University College of Law, Attorney Kathy has been handling women and children's cases as a first-line defender. Her first formal appearance in court as a lawyer is for the 22 counts of rape against ex-Vice Mayor of Pantabangan, Nueva Ecija, Romeo Borja Jr. She and her team from the National Union of People's Lawyers successfully had him convicted for the said crimes after 5 years of litigation. Again, let's welcome Attorney Kathy Panguban.
Okay, we'll see her later. Let's welcome our second speaker for today, Professor Sabrina Gacad. Economist by training, feminist at heart. Sabrina Gacad finds pleasure in defying patriarchal and capitalist regulation of bodies, identities, relations, and individual and collective aspirations. Ina is presently an assistant professor at the Department of Women and Development Studies at the College of Social Work and Community Development in UP Diliman. Her research interests include sexuality, bodily autonomy, reproductive health, behaviors and policies, and authentic movement. Ina was an Australia Award Scholar and received a Master of Economics from the University of Sydney in 2019. In March 2020, Ina also founded the Lunas Collective, a feminist, inclusive, volunteer-powered chat service offering a safe online space for all people who are seeking support related to gender-based violence and reproductive health. This project is a response to the vulnerabilities that COVID-19 and the enhanced community quarantines created for women and people of diverse SOGI across the Philippines. Thank you for joining us today, Professor Sabrina Gacad.
It's also our pleasure to be joined by our next guest speaker, Police Lieutenant Colonel Joy E. Tombok. She is the Acting Chief of Anti-Violence Against Women and Children Division in the Women and Children Protection Center of the Philippine National Police. Welcome to our program, Police Lieutenant Colonel Joy E. Tombok.
Hello, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you also.
So the statistics around sexual assault and violence remain bleak, and things are actually getting worse. Here in the Philippines, data from the Philippine National Police show that in light of the pandemic, 602 people across the country were raped from March 17 to May 23, or an average of 8 people daily. From March 15 to April 30 alone, 804 incidents of gender-based violence and violence against women and children were already reported. This despite the suspicion that most victims will be having a hard time reporting their abusers because of the lockdown. Our first question today is, why do we have so many cases of sexual assault, harassment, and violence in the Philippines? And is the lockdown making it worse? We can start with Lieutenant Colonel Joy, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, so by the way, anyone can be sexually harassed. Sexual harassment is a gender neutral offense, meaning men can sexually harass women, and that women can also sexually harass men. So both women and men can be victims of sexual harassment. But persons or people of the same sex can also sexually harass each other as long as the harassment is based on the sex rather than sexual orientation. However, statistics show that majority of the sexual harassment charges are brought by women claiming that they were sexually harassed by men. So for me, sexual harassment occurs because of a gender bias and or gender inequality, wherein women and children, especially girls, are perceived as weak. Hence, they are vulnerable to sexual harassment and other gender-based violence. So another reason for the occurrence of sexual harassment is the sex discrimination, wherein a woman or someone or a woman is treated differently or less favorably or not being given the same opportunity as a person of different sex because of their sex. So another cause may be the disrespect or behavioral difference of a person. So during lockdown, there was a drop in reported cases in the PNP, but this does not mean that a drop in gender-based incidents, as the data that we have only shows the cases reported in the PNP. So this may be attributed to the physical difficulty of victims to report incidents in the police stations. But we expect that reports of incidents or sexual harassment cases or other gender-based violence will increase or will be reported at a later date.
Like after the lockdown.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. We're very happy that you are here because, of course, the Philippine National Police is you're really at the forefront of the fight against sexual harassment and abuse and violence. So your input, ma'am, will be highly relevant to the discussion. Let me also call on Attorney Kathy. Attorney Kathy, are you there?
Hi.
Hi, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe you are also representing Gabriela and NUPL, and you're also involved in a lot of these sexual violence and harassment cases.
Yes. Hello. First off, I'd like to greet everyone a pleasant afternoon. For the first question, we think cases of different forms of violence against women, which include sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, and even prostitution, happen due to a confluence of economic and cultural factors. One, poverty forces women to grip at knife's edge to ensure food on their tables. And this situation is unfortunately taken advantage of by unscrupulous beings. So we note spikes of cases of violence against women in poverty and sometimes, and most of the time, in disaster-stricken areas. So most of the cases that we encounter about domestic violence, on the other hand, we note that women in abusive relationship choose to stay, not because they want to or because they believe in the concept of love and forever, but they have no other choice. Otherwise, they and their children can go hungry without the provisions given by their abusive partners. So this brings us to the cultural factor. This patriarchal view where women are seen as second-class citizens or lesser human beings. They experience discrimination at work because of the view that they should not be the ones primarily providing for their families. Women cannot practically say no to their abusive partners since they are the ones providing for the family's needs. Women cannot practically say no to the sexual advances of their superiors or their professors for fear of being laid off from work or be given a failing grade and repeat the subject for another semester. That could add up to the pile of bills that need to be paid. So these economic and cultural factors in general catalyze the different forms of violence against women. Now, is the lockdown making it worse? We see it, yes. Yes, because again, the economic impact. Many have already lost their jobs and are desperately looking for ways to survive the day. And not to mention the fact that many of the victims are locked down too inside their homes with their perpetrators.
I agree, Attorney Kathy. It's closely related to poverty and cultural factors as well. May we also call on Professor Sabrina? Ma'am, what about in Luna's collective and in the academe? Because you're also with the UP Diliman. So please share with us your experience.
Yeah, so basically everything that everyone's already said. I just wanted to emphasize that gender power relations are very strongly integrated in our cultures. And this means that there is a particular power that rests in people who are born male and demonstrate masculinity. And everyone else that's not male and masculine are expected to follow the control of people who are. So dito, we see women or people who are not born as female but identify as women, or people who have different sexual orientations, and they're not conforming to the norm of gender relations, or they're not belonging to the masculine group, puts them at the risk of the people who are masculine. And what happens is the control that exists by the control that exists already by saying that we have to follow so and so rules, we have to follow the word of your father, and so on. This kind of control extends to violence. This kind of control extends to harassment. And finally, the last thing I wanted to say about why there are so many cases is also because our culture doesn't allow women and survivors, people of diverse sexual orientations and gender identities, to speak freely about their experiences without being blamed for what happened to them. And because people are often shamed for having experienced sexual harassment, because people are often told that it must have been what they were doing, it must have been what they were wearing, it must have been what they were saying, people begin to think that finally the problem lies with the survivor or the victim and not the perpetrator. So this kind of culture, which we call rape culture and victim blaming, prevents people from speaking out more freely, prevents people from seeking help more actively. And because people can't seek help, the perpetrators are free to do as they please. So it's this kind of culture that also enables the perpetrators of harassment and violence. Yeah.
Yes, and Prof, maybe you can also comment on this follow-up question about the effects of sexual violence to victims. So it's great that you also mentioned that it's not just women that are victims. It could be anybody. It could be men. It could be the LGBT community as well. So what do you think are the effects of sexual violence or sexual harassment to the victims?
Definitely, one of the biggest effects would be fear. This sense that wherever they go, they're not safe. That fear follows people who survive experiences of sexual violence, or even straight up violence that has nothing to do with sexual orientations or gender identities. So there's that fear, and that kind of fear prevents people from seeking help. And that kind of fear extends to giving the perpetrator the power to control the behavior of the survivors. So there's that fear. And then second, there's that sense of that they don't control their bodies or their environment. So there's the sense of powerlessness. And then finally, there have been studies regarding this. There's a recognition, even because people are blamed a lot for the violence they experience, this recognition that they must have caused it upon themselves, which is entirely untrue and entirely unfair.
That's right. And Lieutenant Colonel Joy, are women and children the common victims? And how often do you usually get, say, male or LGBTQ victims?
Based on our records, most of the victims of sexual harassment are women and children, both boys and girls. So as of now, I don't have the data, but based on what we have presented in the previous meetings or presentations, most of the victims are women and boys and girls.
So children doesn't just mean girls. Do you also get boys?
Yes, we have also boys who are victims of sexual harassment.
Right.
Sexual
I think,
assault.
yeah, we can emphasize that, Chief, because most Filipinos think when you talk about sexual assault or sexual violence that it only happens to women and girls. But it can also happen to little boys and to
Yes.
male victims as well. Have you ever, ma'am, experienced a male victim, like an adult male?
Adult male, no. Children, boys.
Children.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief. Attorney Kathy, we enacted the Safe Spaces Act last year. Is this enough to stop the increase of sexual cases? What do you think?
Well, the Safe Spaces Act is a welcome legislation. It aimed at stopping the spike in sexual violence cases. We see it as a victory in itself. However, we've seen it that despite victories in legislation, we have Republic Act 9262, the anti-VAUSI, the amendments to the anti-rape law. There's still much to do to completely change the landscape for women and children and even LGBTQ members. We need to engage in a cultural transformation to change the perception about women as second-class citizens or as mere sex chattels, and see and treat them as partners in raising the family and in achieving a more humane and just society.
That's right. We will talk about mindset and how we can change that later. But thank you so much for your answers. I will pass you on to Ms. Roma now for the second question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Flaw. For our second question, let's start with educational institutions are often viewed as second homes and educators as second parents. The students feel and are safe in these second homes and is just assumed and not readily questioned. The notion that second parents can abuse their children is also often deemed unthinkable. The home, after all, is widely considered to be the safest of all spaces. Recent trending hashtags, however, reveal that a lot of sexual assault and harassment cases happened in schools and universities. Now, for the second question, how can schools and universities break the stigma and the silence that often accompany experiences of sexual harassment? So let's start with Lieutenant Colonel Joy Tombok for this one.
Okay. So for me, the school administrators have the responsibility of providing or giving a safe environment or learning environment for the students or our adolescents, no? And then students therefore must be taught the difference between friendly teasing and bullying, or the different behaviors or the behaviors that are accepted and those that are not accepted. So victims of sexual harassment usually feel ashamed or embarrassed. So they are prevented from reporting the incidents because of the degrading nature of the incident or the case. So as part of the school administration, like the teachers or the counselors, they must explain to the students or the victims that being sexually harassed is not their fault. They must be encouraged to speak out so that they will be supported, or they will be treated, or they will be responded appropriately. So they must be encouraged to speak out, and they must be supported, and they must be made understood that it's not their fault. It's not their fault that they are being harassed, but it's the behavior of the abuser that is the problem, that is the existing problem. So with this, in the school, uh, both the abuser and the victim must be responded, or there must be interventions that must be given to them, both the abuser and the abused, in order that the cycle of violence will be prevented.
Exactly, Colonel. But I just have a question. Do you also receive a lot of reports or cases of sexual assaults or harassments from schools or universities?
um, Based on our records, we also have cases like that, but usually it's the school that first make a response, or they first responded to the incident. Then, if they cannot resolve, they go to our office to report or to ask for help. So usually it's in the school first. The school administration first resolve the incident.
Okay, I see. Thank you so much, Colonel. Now let's also have attorney Kathy.
Yes, in addition to what has already been said, I think the it should start with education. We need to re-educate our youth and even ourselves through proactive gender sensitivity trainings and seminars that sexual harassment happens not because a woman wears revealing clothes or engages herself in drinking spree with male friends, etc. Sexual harassment happens because of the prevailing perspective that women are considered as mere sex objects and they cannot speak out against these violations.
Okay, yeah. Are there a lot of seminars right now circulating in universities and schools to be, for us to be aware of sexual harassment, for so that the students will be aware of their rights against this sexual harassment?
Yeah, as far as I know, there are universities that are already proactively engaging in the conduct of gender sensitivity trainings and seminars. UP has it. If I'm not mistaken, even the other universities in Metro Manila are already doing these seminars and trainings for gender sensitivity.
Wow, that's good to know. Thank you so much, attorney. So I just have a follow-up question. So once victims speak out, how can schools and universities protect these victims against further stigma or retaliation by the accused? May we have Ms. Sabrina?
Right. So the first thing that institutions have to do when they receive complaints is to investigate fairly and show the survivors, the victim survivors, that they are supporting them in this difficult period of time. And that support should include psychosocial support, counseling. It should include reports to authorities if survivors ask for that. So the general idea is, even before the abuse happens, what we have to be able to create in our schools, especially primary education, secondary education, what we have to create are safe spaces. Places where people who are uncomfortable, who are experiencing something uncomfortable, can go and seek help. That's the first thing. The second thing is, young people especially, should be taught about consent. What is consent? The permission of the person to share anything. Share a pencil, share your lunch, touch your body, touch their body, touch their hair, touch their face. So that's one. And then the second element of consent is teaching every individual what feels good for them and what doesn't. So this idea that there's a bad touch, there's a good touch, and the bad touch creates discomfort. And whenever the bad touch is felt, that is already a reason to seek support. And that's already a reason to seek help. So this kind of mechanism is kind of preventive, but it ties into the support system that will exist when complaints are received, because once the complaints are issued or once the complaints are filed, then there is no doubt that the support system will accept the complaints fairly. There's no doubt that the complaints will be treated with utmost respect, treated with utmost recognition of the complainants or the survivor or the victim's experiences and validating these experiences. And then finally, especially in universities and for primary, secondary education institutions, we also have to understand that perpetrators of violence, especially when they're fairly young, also need some kind of intervention. And usually this intervention must happen in a psychosocial format because we want to also understand what environment these young people are going or living in and how we can change their mindset about bodies, about consent, about sexuality. And so you want to pay attention also not just to the victim survivors but also to the perpetrators with the intention of reforming the perpetrators' attitudes and mindset.
That's Thank you so much, Miss Sabrina. May we have also like additional answer from attorney?
Hello, yeah. Under the Safe Spaces Act,
Mhm.
schools are required to promulgate rules and procedures in the conduct of investigation of sexual harassment cases and create a committee on decorum on investigation, separate and distinct actually from the usual human resource department we have. So under the law, every school must adopt and publish grievance procedures to facilitate the filing of complaints by students and faculty members. And even if an individual does not want to file a complaint, so long as the school authorities have reasonable knowledge of such incidents, the school should promptly investigate to determine the veracity of such information or knowledge and the circumstances under which the sexual harassment or sexual violence were committed, and take appropriate steps to resolve the situation. So I think these procedures must be accessible and must be always accessible and friendly to the victims.
Thank you so much, attorney. The victims have also this kind of traumatic experiences. Are there organizations or groups that help the victims to somehow recover from this, what I call this, from any traumatic experience from sexual harassment? May we have maybe a Lieutenant Colonel Joy?
Yes, for our complainants or for victims of violence, we usually refer our clients to the mental health institution for psychological assessment and intervention in order for her to recover and be able to have a courage to pursue a case against her perpetrator. So in the PNP, we don't have office which gives psychological assistance to our clients, but we refer them to other institutions. Some of them are psychologists from NGOs and also other hospitals in the government, like in the PGH, for our children victims of violence or harassment.
Thank you so much, Colonel. This is very helpful. And this will be my last question. So, university-based fraternities have been on the spotlight lately due to leaked chat logs talking lewdly about their schoolmates, friends, and even exes, and sharing nude photos and sex videos online. What can schools and university do about this? Maybe we will start with Miss Sabrina.
For this kind of attitude, it contributes to rape culture, this whole idea that men or boys can gather together and find some sense of entertainment from other people's private photos or videos. This kind of behavior has to be investigated. The investigations have to go very transparently, identifying the extent of culpability of people who are involved. And then there has to be also immediate sanctions. Because I think this kind of behavior, people will pass it off as we are just being friends, hanging out and sharing stories. But what it doesn't really get to the heart of is the harm that it creates from the side of the victim survivors, the people whose videos and photos were shared or leaked, and then the harm that it creates to the rest of the community, that it tells the community this kind of exchange, this kind of entertainment is allowable. So what we have to do is really offer swift penalties to everybody that is implicated in these cases. And then finally, of course, offer support to the survivors, offer support to the people who are affected by it, and also offer spaces for continued discussion in the community about why such behaviors are wrong and why such behaviors constitute violations of individual well-being.
Thank you so much, Miss Sabrina. This is really helpful, especially for the youth right now. We should really make, a good decision, because we should need to think about the result in the long run of everything what we're doing. Well, let's continue our discussion to the third question with Miss Florence.
Sexual harassment is always a traumatizing experience. Harassment leaves a negative feeling that doesn't go away, no matter how one tries to rationalize the experience. Due to the difficulty of speaking out against assault and harassment, victims end up keeping the experience and the pain to themselves. Worse, victims end up doubting, even hurting themselves. So our third question is, how and where can victims ask for help? And how can we stop victim blaming? So let's start with Chief Joy.
Thank you. Okay. So an action or behavior is considered as sexual assault or harassment if such action or behavior made a person feel unsafe or uncomfortable, was unwanted, or violated a person's body. So in sexual assault or harassment, it matters what the person being assaulted or harassed thinks or feels. And it doesn't matter if the perpetrator thinks that what he has done or what he is doing is right or that is welcomed by the victim. So it doesn't matter. What matters most is what the victim or the person being assaulted or harassed feels and thinks. So most importantly, it is never, I want to emphasize that it is never the victim's fault. So as what I have said earlier. And we should not allow anyone to blame the victim for being harassed or sexually assaulted. So for victim or survivor of sexual assault or sexual harassment, they can report an incident and ask for help from the PNP Women and Children Protection Center in Camp Crame or in Women and Children Protection Desk in police stations PNP-wide. So it is also important that a victim survivor of harassment be supported by a family and friends in fighting for what is right and in fighting for her rights. So that's all, ma'am.
Ma'am, just to emphasize, so any victim can go to any police station. There's always a women and children's desk there.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that correct,
yes, ma'am?
ma'am?
Yeah, in each police station, we have women and children protection desks.
Okay. All right. So that's good information for everyone. Attorney Cassie, would you like to say something about this as well?
Yes, for legal advice, be it at NUPL and even at Gabriela, we provide free legal advice for victims of different forms of violence against women. And for NUPL, you may reach us through our Facebook page. It's National Union of People's Lawyers, and from there we can have a fruitful engagement or discourse about the situation that we're in. Insofar as stopping the victim blaming, I think we need to speak up and call out views that are perpetuating or peddling the culture of victim blaming. We need to engage these people in healthy debates, rather than reduce the discourse in ad hominem attacks. We need to educate and reach out to as many people as possible.
That's right. So they can contact you and get free legal advice. Is that correct, attorney?
Yes, through our Facebook page, National Union of People's Lawyers.
There you go. Thank you for that, attorney. And Professor Sabrina?
So, people who need support for gender-based violence concerns, people who need support for sexual violence online or in real life, can always send a message to Luna's Collective at facebook.com/Luna's Collective. We are online 1 to 4 p.m. every day except Sundays. And we offer psychological counseling or feminist counseling. We offer psychosocial support. Then we can provide contact information for relevant authorities. So
Yes.
how do we stop victim blaming? It's first, everyone having to accept that sexual violence, sexual harassment is never the victim's fault. And second, it also starts with accepting that whatever the person is telling you, accepting that as true, and telling the survivor, the victim survivor, that what they experienced is wrong and that we understand why they feel unsafe and fearful. It's this whole shift from a situation where we assume that people might just be making stories, or we think that we're too uncomfortable with the things they're sharing, that we don't want to believe them. So I think the third thing we want to do is begin to be comfortable with the fact that violence happens to people for no reason except the person who perpetrated the violence chose to do it. So if we start from that point, then we can see that it's never the client or the victim or the survivor's fault. And then we can begin to offer support to the survivors and to the victims. And then we can begin to encourage other people around us to start believing the same way or to start thinking the same way. And then finally, if we needed more, talking points to help people figure out why it's never the victim's fault, I think we start asking why we know what we know. Why do we think we always have to follow the rules, or why do we think we always have to follow the authority of people around us, whether they be family members or superiors in school or even people around us on the streets? So why do we have to do that? Why do we have to show respect? And then extend the question to why do we have to show respect when we're not comfortable? And then the answer becomes, we've been socialized, we've been taught, we've been raised in this manner. And then we start asking, what do we do when we're unsafe? What do we do when we don't feel comfortable? And the first thing we want to always say the first thing we want to say to ourselves when we feel uncomfortable is, you're not comfortable right now. You are experiencing some form of discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
At that very minimum level, just acknowledging that what you may be experiencing is not comfortable is the first step to moving away from it. And second is the first step to telling someone else, verbally or non-verbally, that they are not welcome. And then the second thing we have to practice, and this one takes practice really, is this whole idea of saying no. No, please don't touch me. No, please don't talk to me that way. No, you're not welcome here. It takes practice because our culture has, as I said earlier, and as many of our speakers have also said, we've been taught that we should accept a lot of the criticisms that come our way. We should accept all these interventions and all these intrusions into our private personal lives because that is the way to show respect. So what we have to practice is showing respectful no's, articulating respectfully that people are not welcome in our personal space. And then once we could keep on practicing that, other people start seeing that we're doing it, other people start practicing that as well. And then we shift the whole debate about sexual harassment and violence, not to whatever it is that they were doing, but we shift it towards, well, you made me uncomfortable. So whose fault is it now that you made me uncomfortable, right? And then from there, we start shifting the whole discourse about whether or not it is the victim's fault, because we start putting the pressure of the harassment onto the harasser. Yeah.
Yes, great points, Prof. I think in the Philippines, it's very difficult for women or for the weaker sex to say no. And you're right, we really have to practice that. And once you start getting uncomfortable, then there must be something there. If you need help, go to Facebook, look for Luna's Collective. They have a chat service from 1 to 4. You can chat with someone there if you're not sure what you're feeling, because they offer psychological support. That's a great platform, Prof, by the way. So, going to a follow-up question, the trend now is to name and call out perpetrators online. So Twitter world is actually buzzing with a lot of sexual harassment and sexual assault accusations. So is this acceptable? Maybe we can ask Attorney Kathy first in a legal perspective.
Well, from a legal, I think no. We are, well, for me, I think we should engage them in healthy debates rather than fall off into ad hominem attacks and open ourselves up to a number of possible cases for litigation later on, such as libel, etc. We should attack the view, not the person himself. And let's use these engagements as platforms to educate more people on the root causes why violence against women in the first place happen. So I think that's more of the legal and the cultural and social side of it.
I like what you say about attacking the view and not the person. But I think some of the, especially women who've been victimized and who have been silent for a long time, find some sort of therapy in naming and calling out their perpetrators on Twitter or on Facebook. But yes, they're putting themselves in maybe legal trouble later on also. Thank you, Attorney. Chief Joy, ma'am, have you encountered any cases like this where the victims just announced it online and then reported it to police, but with no cases or no, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot, ma'am. But once that complaint or report or the comments in Facebook reach our office, we engage them and we advise them to file a complaint, and we assist them in filing a complaint in the prosecutor's office.
So first, ma'am, they have to file a complaint with the police, right? Before they file a complaint in court.
Yeah, they have to report the incident in the our office or in the Women and Children Protection Desk, and we assist them in filing a complaint at the prosecutor's office. So we assist them in preparing the documents, the pieces of evidence, and we also escort or assist them in filing the complaint at the prosecutor's office.
Okay, so they can just go to any police station as well.
Yes, ma'am. Particularly
Nationwide.
at the Women and Children Protection Desk.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Chief Joy. And then on to our last follow-up question. Recently, there has been a controversy involving Frankie Pangelinans that sparked the hashtag Iha Ako movement. How do we change the mindset, especially of older generations, in the way they talk to and with women? So I think we can start with Professor Sabrina.
That's a big question. How do we change the mindset of an older generation? The first thing I want to say is it's not just an older generation whose mindset has to change. Everybody's mindset about sexual harassment, sexual violence, everybody's mindset about sexuality and gender identities and sexual orientation, they all have to change. And what we want to look for is how do we begin to support people based on their pleasures? How do we begin to support people even in their anger and in their discomfort? And this is where I also wanted to say that this whole culture of calling out perpetrators online, I have very high respect for the people, for the women and men that speak out, especially against their perpetrators, because the fear that has been keeping them silent is very hard to overcome. So finally, just overcoming that fear and speaking out and telling people these are the people who harmed me is a form of liberation, like what has already been said. And second, it also invites the whole community to begin to support the survivors by saying that we are with you in this problem, we are with you in healing, and we are with you in seeking justice against so and so perpetrators. So I really support that. I have high respect for the people who do it. And then it leads us to this whole notion of how do we begin to change the mindset of people is if they start seeing the clamor from so many different people in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world, speaking out about experiences of sexual violence and sexual harassment, and showing that there's no other common denominator except there was a perpetrator of violence, which tells us that the problem doesn't really fall on the victims or the survivors. The problem once more starts with the perpetrators who decided to commit violations of other people's privacies or personal spaces. Yeah, and so I think that kind of broad pressure from a community, and you know how the internet gets really noisy, and the internet can be very vindictive, and that's quite scary. And I agree that we do have to find some level of respect for the people who we begin to talk with online, but also we also have to find respect for the anger that people are expressing. And so this kind of pressure, I hope, is making people ask the question, why are they so angry? Why are the people online so angry about sexual harassment, sexual violence? And then that kind of social pressure starts, hopefully, to open up spaces for dialogue. So before we can engage in a conversation, there has to be a conversation starter. So if the conversation starter is that angry mob on social media, then I would take it as a good conversation starter. And then finally, as for the older generation, how do we want to change their minds? Maybe the last thing I would say about it is I guess this would be an appeal to the older generation to find a way to support what makes people feel good. And then begin to implement rules around people who will violate what makes people feel good, instead of always insisting that people have to be careful so they don't attract any form of sexual violence or harm. See, because if we keep saying that we have to be careful, then we might as well not leave the house, right? We might as well not move because I might walk down and I might trip, and then that will cause me harm. So it's very absurd, all these regulations on an individual behavior that helps people seek pleasure. So what we want to do is create rules for people who violate other people's pleasures, and then support that instead of forcing people to just be safe. Whatever being safe means would be different from person to person. And so let's support people to define what safety is. Let's support people to define their pleasures. And then let's support them seeking these pleasures, including calling out the people who violate individual privacy, who violate individual bodies, and also who perpetrate sexual violence and sexual harm, and all other forms of violence and all other forms of harm against others.
That's right. Let's hear from Attorney Kathy also.
Well, in addition to what has already been said by Professor, I think education campaign is still one of the potent tool to change the mindset, not just of the older generations, but even among us. And of course, with the advent of technology, we can use our social media platforms for these engagements, to enrich the engagements that we have on sexual violence cases.
Well, thank you so much for your time and all your great input to all our guests. So let's move on to the next part of the program.
Thank you so much, Miss Florence. This is really interesting, and I'm really learning a lot that we should be really educated enough for us to protect our personal space, and it's okay to say no. Yes, okay. Well, that's it. So as we move towards the end of the program, let's have some questions from our Facebook viewers. We have here a question from Miss Rosemary Conchas. She wants to ask, how can I help a friend who experienced such sexual harassment or violence? Is it legally allowed to stand up for them if they feel scared to speak up? Who would like to answer?
Maybe Attorney Kathy or Chief Joy?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Attorney Kathy.
Okay. The issue of sexual harassment is a public crime. So under the law, anyone can speak up for a friend, for a friend who has experienced sexual harassment, and for a school setting, as I said earlier, the school authorities, even if a victim doesn't want to file a complaint, so long as school authorities have reasonable knowledge as to the existence of such a sexual harassment incident, it is incumbent upon them to conduct investigations. So, considering the nature of the crime as a public crime.
Mm-hmm. And maybe to Chief Joy, is it also possible for a family member or a friend to report it on their behalf?
Yes, ma'am. The family or friends can report, but the problem is the challenge we encounter is that when the victim is an adult, we cannot actually force her to sign the affidavit, but instead we just wait for her to decide when he is ready. We usually wait for the victim to decide when she is ready to file a case. That's what one of the challenges we are encountering. Unlike for the minors, minor victims, where anyone can file in his or in her behalf for the children. But for the adult complainants, that's one of the challenges that we are encountering. So I would, for me, it's really important that adult complainants should have or should first undergo psychological assessment and intervention, so that she will be fully determined. So once she is already given psychological assistance, she will be fully determined to file a case against her perpetrator. So
That's right.
I think the psychological assistance, the psychological intervention is also important in the first part of the treatment or in dealing with the case that being brought to the office of the police.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
I guess Miss Sabrina would also like to give a follow-up answer from the current question.
Yes, just to add to especially what Ma'am Joy has also said, if we wanted to support survivors of harassment or sexual violence, what we always have to do is ask them what they need from us, especially if they're friends, so close people to us, family, friends. Usually it helps them the most if we ask them, what kind of support do you need? What kind of help do you need? And how do you want to proceed? So that we don't lose the focus on supporting the survivors, and then we don't also take away from them the capacity to control the situation. So what we really want to do is help them control the situation. And like what Lieutenant Colonel Joy said, when they're ready to file the case, then we go with them if we have to the station, then support them every step of the way. But it always has to start with asking the survivors what they need from us.
Oh, I see.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sabrina. So we have here another question from Ms. Jeremiah Shara Seraspe. What can the family and friends do to support survivors of sexual abuse?
Yes. Listen, I think based also on the experience of Luna's Collective, it's very difficult for people, survivors of sexual harassment and sexual abuse, to begin to talk about the abuses they've experienced. And it eats away at them from the inside. So what we want to make them feel is that whenever they want to talk about it, we are willing to listen. That's definitely the first thing. The second thing we want to do is never ever blame them for what happened to them. It's not their fault. We have to repeat it to them, especially if they don't believe that it's not their fault. And then finally, maybe a third thing we can do is encourage them to seek psychosocial support so that the trauma that has been caused by the sexual violence incidences can begin to be addressed by a more capable person. And that can send us into healing. So that's what we really would like to do.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sabrina. And let's just have one last question from our Facebook viewer from Dan Almares. What legal punishment a person can get for gaslighting or blackmailing a victim by using his power to sexually abuse someone? Maybe let's start with attorney.
Yes, under the Safe Spaces Act, such act, yung gender-based online sexual harassment, it's penalized with payment of fines and jail time. So, So, a person found guilty can be made to pay a considerable amount of fine and spend years, a maximum of years in jail.
Thank you so much, attorney. One last, maybe there's like an additional from Chief for the last question.
Yes, ma'am. Based on the RA 11313, the perpetrators of sexual harassment are also required to undergo gender sensitivity seminar as part of their, like, it's not penalty, but one of the requirements before they can go back to the community. They have to undergo gender sensitivity seminar.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our guests for answering the questions from our Facebook viewers. Well, that's it. So we're really learning a lot from this discussion, and it's really good that we are being educated about sexual harassment. But before we proceed to the end of our program, let's also have final messages from our guests and also to my partners. So let's just start with the final message from our first guest speaker, Attorney Catherine Cathy Panguban.
Yes. Sexual harassment and other forms of violence against women are causes for public concern. And the government must ensure that mechanisms on the ground are available and accessible to help the victims. And more importantly, the culture of victim blaming must be abandoned to encourage more victims to speak up and seek redress for the wrong done against their persons. Again, they need our help and support, not our judgment. So thank you for having me this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Attorney Cathy. Let's also have a message from Miss Sabrina.
All right. So my final message is an invitation to everyone that's online, that's listening and viewing this program too. It's an invitation for us to make survivor-centered care in dealing with sexual violence and sexual harassment the new normal. So let's make care the new normal in the sense that we want to make survivors feel that we see them, we hear them, and definitely what they went through is real and painful, and we are here with them to support them, not just in seeking justice, but also in finding healing. And then finally, I also want to invite everyone to begin to support each other's pleasures and desires and happiness. So it's the other side of supporting everyone in their quest for justice and healing. The other side of that is supporting everyone in each other's journeys for pleasures and happiness.
Thank you so much, Miss Sabrina. And let's also have Colonel Joy for the final message.
Okay. For the victims, I encourage them to speak out, and the PNP, other government agencies are here to support. And also, I would like to encourage the family members and friends of victim to also give their support to the victim, survivor of sexual harassment and other gender-based violence. So that's all.
Thank you so much, Colonel. And let's also have a final message from Miss Florence.
Right. I like the fact that the new law on sexual harassment is called Safe Spaces Act, because I think most of us think that safe space just means physical space, right? We put a fence around our houses because we want to be safe from robbers and from anyone who can intrude into our house. But sometimes the danger is inside. So safe space doesn't just mean physical, it's also psychological, it's also social, it's personal. So for parents, adults, anybody out there who might be a victim of sexual harassment, abuse, or worse, violence, don't be afraid to speak out. So I'm very happy that we have representatives from the police. Chief Joy gave a tip to everyone. You can go to any police station in your community and look for the women's and children's desk if you want to complain. Attorney Cathy of the National Union of People's Lawyers also offered free legal services. All you have to do is go to their Facebook page and find help there. Now, if you are still dealing with emotional confusion or psychological stress and you are not sure what you're going to do next, then there's also Luna's Collective of Professor Sabrina who can help you out. Again, all you have to do is go to the Facebook page and chat with anyone from Luna's Collective. So, Miss Roma, I think we had a very, very good discussion today, and something that might be very, very helpful for people out there who need this kind of help. So let's all create a safe space for everyone, not just for women, but also for men and for the LGBTQ community. And I look forward to the day where the Philippines will have less cases of sexual harassment, abuse, and violence. So thank you very much to all our guests.
Thank you so much, Miss Florence. Indeed, I agree with you. It's really an interesting discussion and topic. And what really struck me most is that you really need to take good care or guard your personal space. If you're not comfortable anymore, it's okay and it's your right to say no. And I hope we could already stop this victim blaming. And you don't have to tell me what to dress and how to dress. Well, that's it. It's a very meaningful discussion today, and we hope you learn as much as we did from our speakers. Thank you so much to our guests for today and to everyone who joined us, including the technical staff. And of course, this will not be possible without each of you. And we're looking forward to seeing you again to our next online salon. Thank you for watching us again. And please don't forget to leave a comment down below, like and share our Facebook page, and make sure to subscribe and like our YouTube channel, GLCA TV. Now, let's also have our thought of the day.
All right. So our thought of the day is, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. That's from Carl Jung. So to all the victims of sexual assault and harassment, gather the courage to speak up and be free of the trauma and the stigma. Don't let what happened to you affect you for the rest of your life. Choose to be free. Report the abusers. They should be the ones living in fear, not you. So again, this is Florence.
And this is Rama. For now, stay safe, everyone.